Welcome back to my channel and Facebook page. Today's update is not just another round of drama in Genoa City. What we are about to unfold is a chess match played in the shadows, where whispers become weapons and loyalty becomes currency. Phyllis's knowledge of Kane's new dark plots isn't just a handful of scattered rumors. No, what she holds is nothing less than a blueprint, a master plan for power reorganization. This plan was forced into motion after Kane made a brutal, yet necessary move, firing Michael Baldwin. Cutting Michael out seemed reckless to the outside world, but for Kane, it was a calculated purge. Michael had always been both a shield and a liability. His sharp mind made him useful, but his unpredictable principles made him dangerous. To close the circle and silence potential leaks, Michael had to go. But if Kane thought this move would stabilize his empire, he was mistaken. Because his biggest headache was still ahead. And that headache has a name: Billy Abbott. With Michael no longer available to act as a legal wall and gatekeeper, Kane was exposed. He needed a new strategy. Not just a patch, not just a defense, but a sophisticated plan to reshape the battlefield. That's where Phyllis stepped in, like a sharp, double-edged sword. Phyllis enters the game. Phyllis had her own history with Michael. She never fully trusted his so-called loyalty, and she despised the way he always injected morality into ruthless business. So when Kane fired him, Phyllis saw an opening. She reassured Kane that the decision was right, and she went further. She presented him with a complete package, a layered solution, a blueprint to not only neutralize Billy but also to control the entire narrative. Phyllis's brilliance lay in her refusal to go for a frontal attack. She knew Billy thrived in direct battles. His impulsive nature made him unpredictable, yes, but also resilient. Instead, she proposed targeting the ecosystem around him. Billy doesn't survive on his own. He survives because of his network, connections, finances, media allies, and the loyalty of key personnel. Phyllis proposed dismantling this web. Insert wedges of distrust, create friction, and force Billy's allies to start questioning his ability to lead. Contracts delayed. Technical freezes. Internal audits. Small moves, but devastating when stacked together. A few carefully placed obstacles, and suddenly Billy would look less like a leader and more like a liability. The psychological trap. But Phyllis didn't stop there. She knew the power of perception. She proposed pushing neutral content into the public sphere: articles, whispers, objective praise about the new management standards. No one would ever mention Billy by name, but the implication was clear. A fresh breeze was blowing through Genoa City, one that quietly suggested Billy belonged to the old, outdated style. And the genius of this approach? The more defensive Billy became, the more unstable he would appear. Every overreaction could be clipped, edited, and reframed as evidence of his emotional volatility. This was not just a strategy of attack. This was psychological warfare. Billy wouldn't even realize the walls were closing in until it was too late. Phyllis firmly rejected bringing in outsiders. The more people, the more leaks, she told Kane. This operation would remain small, precise, airtight. Michael's firing wasn't just a personnel decision, it was a signal that secrecy would now become the new currency of power. Kane, ever the man of bold moves, gave Phyllis conditional trust. And with that trust came her most dangerous discovery yet: the shadow of an alliance between two giants, Jack Abbott and Victor Newman. Jack and Victor's shadow alliance. Kane knew that Jack and Victor were sworn rivals, polar opposites in style. But when their interests aligned, they could form an iron grip capable of crushing anyone in their path. Jack, with his insight into the emotional weaknesses of his brother Billy, could pull strings from within. Meanwhile, Victor, the master of external pressure, could leverage market weight, shareholder messages, and surgical strikes to amplify every one of Billy's mistakes. Together, they were unstoppable. Phyllis dissected their strategy like a surgeon. Jack would bait Billy into unsafe decisions by playing on his impulsive nature. Victor would then apply outside pressure, magnifying every error into a full-blown crisis. Kane drew two chilling conclusions. 1. Billy must be rendered useless as a pawn so Jack would no longer see value in him. 2. Victor's timeline must be disrupted with enough noise to stretch his focus and divide his attention. Phyllis laid out subtle sabotage: media expense discrepancies, scheduling errors, compliance audits. Nothing scandalous, just enough to create a paper trail of incompetence. Billy would leave behind electronic signatures, forming a careless picture that weakened him from the inside. Jack, being pragmatic, wouldn't bet on a piece under heavy scrutiny. And Victor, bombarded with mixed signals, would struggle to separate the real threats from the decoys. Turning the screw on Billy. Slowly, the noose tightened. Billy was forced into a maze of procedures. Documents delayed, errors highlighted, and compliance committees breathing down his neck. Phyllis painted the picture perfectly. Billy wasn't falling from one fatal blow. He was drowning in a slow burn, a smoldering fire that spread heat evenly until there was no oxygen left. Kane adopted a slower rhythm, cooling his operations, delegating selectively, shrinking the circle of trust. He created a second-order information rule, not just who knew what, but how they understood it. Every associate received just enough truth to function, but never the full picture. Any leak would collapse under its own contradictions. This was secrecy as power, a fortress built not on walls, but on silence. And while Kane operated in the shadows, Phyllis kept her eyes on the risk table. She didn't celebrate Billy's stumbles. She simply waited, feeding the system, ensuring the cracks deepened slowly and invisibly. The quiet war was underway. And then, another alarm rang. Jack and Victor were inching closer to a temporary truce. Kane versus the truce. For Kane, the news was an urgent alarm. A Jack-Victor alliance, even a temporary one, was a nightmare scenario. Decades of rivalry had created tidal waves of destruction. If those currents aligned, Kane's empire could be swept away in silence. He had one choice: widen the friction, turn potential allies into cautious skeptics. Kane leaked selective information. On Jack's side, he whispered reminders of Billy's impulsive failures, forcing supporters to question the cost of backing him. On Victor's side, he hinted at legal risks tied to satellite deals, planting seeds of doubt in a cautious strategist's mind. These weren't direct attacks. They were subtle collisions, tugging at the fragile thread of trust between Jack and Victor. And Kane knew the truth about Genoa City. Family and business were always entangled. Who sat first in a meeting room, whose name was left off a memo, who wasn't invited to a dinner party, all of these details could fracture loyalties. Kane didn't need to draw blood. He just needed to remind everyone that trust was always temporary. Nikki's bombshell and Kane's countermoves. As Kane was weaving his web, a spark fell into the haystack: Nikki Newman. She carried a reminder that no secret ever stays buried. Her sudden news disrupted Victor's rhythm, turning the Newman household into both an opportunity and a risk. For Kane, the lesson was clear. In Genoa, family drama could reshape corporate destiny overnight. He tightened his inner circle even further. Associates were given isolated but interconnected assignments. Leaks would only produce distorted pictures. Publicly, Kane pushed the language of discipline: boring, stable, reassuring. Shareholders saw a wall too thick to attack. But beneath the surface, Kane built pressure points, countdown contracts, market anchors, and subtle cross-penalties that would force Jack and Victor to pay a price for every move. At the same time, Kane seeded quiet whispers. To Jack, there's someone cleaner than Billy. To Victor, the long-term rewards are bigger than any quick strike. Two messages, not contradictory, but designed to trip each other up. It bought Kane breathing room. Enough to reorganize, enough to prepare for the storm. Kane understood one truth: survival in Genoa wasn't about shouting the loudest. It was about holding your breath the longest. He avoided public battles, kept his calm, and let details do the talking. Reports submitted on time. Audits passed. Meetings held without surprises. Normality became his strongest shield. While others chased dramatic headlines, Kane built quiet resilience. He wasn't aiming for quick victories. He was building layers, needles, cushions, victory that could bend but not break. Even if Jack and Victor shook hands, Kane's structure would hold. Not because it was stronger, but because it was designed to flex with the storm. And in Genoa, storms were inevitable. As the day ended, Kane reflected on the board. Billy, neutralized. Jack, distracted. Victor, forced to divide his attention. Nikki, reminding everyone that the past never dies. Victory here wasn't loud. It wasn't fireworks. It was silence. A thick, irreversible silence that signaled the doors had quietly shut behind the opponent. Phyllis had been right. Whoever controls the story, controls the game. And in Genoa City, where family and business bleed into each other, control of the narrative is the only true power. Kane knew this wasn't the end. It was just another chapter in a city that thrives on shifting alliances and endless betrayals. But for now, he held the advantage. Because in this world, victory doesn't belong to the one who shouts the loudest today. It belongs to the one who can hold his breath the longest, until tomorrow.